Hey there guys, today I want to show you the latest edition of the Shipping Container Shop project, which actually isn't even connected to the shop, but it's my brand new welding table slash multifunction outdoor workbench because I plan on using this for many more projects than just welding, but it is purpose built for welding. I did want to give a quick shout out to my local industrial metal supply because they supplied some of the steel for this build. So without further ado, let's get started.
So pretty much with all of my metal related projects, it always starts out with a trip to industrial metal supply, and that usually starts out with a trip to the back of the store where their reference boards are. This just gives me an idea of the materials I need, and then I end up going to the scrap room just to see what other goodies they might have. I get all the steel loaded up and then it's off back home. After I got back from industrial metal supply, I laid out my tabletop and used a few scrap pieces of tubing to get an idea of where I wanted my legs and frame to go. Once I had a general idea of how I wanted my frame to sit underneath the tabletop, I then cut all of my pieces and laid them out. This is what the basic frame components look like, but I did use quite a bit more steel to make all of the other components. Once all my pieces were cut, I like to set everything into place with these angle magnets, and I believe these are pretty darn accurate, but I still like to double check to make sure everything's square just in case one of these might be a little bit off. I like to tack everything into place first and then flip the frame over just to make sure nothing got bumped out of place, and then I continue on with my full welds just on opposite sides of the frame just to make sure nothing gets heated up too quickly.
So right now I've got both of my halves together and they are just being held together by these cross pieces and the magnets. But you may be wondering why I have the tabletop underneath it even though I'm going to be doing my welds up well above the concrete. That is basically to help me keep this square. The tabletop is 100% square. I've already checked it and I'm just referencing all of my placement off of this corner right here.
I did want to point out that you will notice that I'm showing mostly tack welds or just short welds to hold things in place, but all of these joints are being fully welded. Just for the sake of the video, I try to keep these to a minimum.
Nice thing about metal contracting is I don't need any magnets right now. Everything's just friction fit. So at this point, the basic frame is finished. It's pretty much ready for paint, wheels, and a top. But before I do that, I want to install some accessories. And right now, I am just fitting some perforated tubing on the underside of where the top's going to go. And that's going to allow me to add some sliding accessories that will slide out to lengthen the table.
Right here I'm starting on what will become two flip out drawers that will rotate out from the front of the bench. And this is the hinge that the drawers will be mounted on and will provide the swing out action. Right here I'm just adding some perforated sheet metal to the bottoms of the drawers that I found in the scrap room, and these will provide the ability to hold tools but allow for any metal shavings to fall right through. And this is what will eventually become the front slide out drawer. I'm just making this from some flat bar that I also found in the scrap room, and then I'm adding the same perforated sheet metal to the bottom just like the other drawers.
Before I get ready to paint this, I did want to point out that I ended up adding an additional support here and here, and that's what's going to hold my drawer assembly that will slide out from the front, as well as a backstop here, and that's just basically to serve as a stop for these little flip out drawers.
After everything was sanded smooth, I then cleaned everything off with paint thinner and gave it a couple of coats of paint. And for the rest of my perforated sheet metal, I just gave this a clear coat of Penetrol because I wanted to maintain that metal look. After I had my drawers installed, it was now time to add the top onto the frame, and for this I chose not to weld the top on, but rather weld on tabs to the top so that I could attach it to the frame with sheet metal screws. And the big reason for this is that I may plan in the future to have a grid of holes plasma cut on the top, and it'll just make taking the top off that much easier.
So right now I've got the table set up with the expansion sections sitting perfectly flush with the top plate of the table surface. And what I'm doing here is adding some adjustable bolts that I will tack underneath here, but they are sitting right through the extension arms, and then I'll just tack them in place, and then this will all be one sliding unit.
After I got the table extension slide outs welded together and made sure they were operating properly, I gave them a quick coat of paint and then focused my attention on the leveling stops that I was going to place on the four corners of the table to prevent it from rolling, as well as to give me the ability to make the table level just in case I happen to be on an uneven surface. And after adding another couple of accessory hooks, I then focused my attention on the electrical, and for this I just got a pre-plumbed extension cord and just made some brackets and bolted it to the bottom of the table.
Each one of these drawers has an L bracket for added support and is held in place by a big long magnet back here. I know some will mention that you can get plastic inserts for these, and I actually did consider that, but I plan on just leaving these open so that I can just hook like clamps in there, or maybe put my MIG torch in there or whatever, just as like an additional way to hold things. Okay, so now you've seen how it went together and the basic functions of the table. Now I'm going to go into what I've been doing for a lot of my more recent projects. What would I do differently, and do I have any plans for this in the future? So first I'm going to start out with what I like about the table, which is pretty much about 95% of it. I'm very happy with the way it came out, although there's always room for improvement. Starting off with the front drawers, I actually really like these. I definitely could have gotten more drawer space if I probably would have done traditional drawers or one single slide out. But I love the way that these flip out, and to me it's kind of like an inspirational thing. It's just, it's kind of a cool factor, and I'm really happy with it. I would not change that. The slide outs work perfectly and exactly the way I wanted them to. I can adjust them higher or lower depending on if there's any sag or some really heavy material. So I wouldn't change anything about that. The size of the table is 30 inches wide by 53 inches long, and I actually really like that size. I wasn't quite sure in the beginning. I just kind of arbitrarily figured that would be a good size, but doing a couple of small projects on it, I really like the size of it, and it makes for a table that is not too terribly big. It's easy to maneuver around. As for the stops, I like the way they work in theory, but I have to use a drill to function them, and I may do some changes with that in the future. But for now, you know, they will work and they will get the table level for anything I need. But I may add some sort of little additional thing there. As for plans for the future, that mostly has to do with the top, which is the big reason why I didn't weld the top to the frame and just attached it with the tabs instead. I have a plan to have a series or a grid of holes, plasma cut on the top, to be used as clamping holes with bar clamps to attach materials or jigs to, as well as use a mag drill to drill a series of holes so that I can use one half of these barrel hinges as little stops so that I can set up quick 90s or just use them as a way to keep materials from sliding or moving off the table. Additionally, I may use some of these barrel hinges as accessory holders too, by welding the male end onto, say, one of the legs and welding the female end onto a platform to hold a tool or some sort of a little accessory table, and then obviously that would just slide in like that and this would be welded to the frame. I didn't attach those right now just because it was one of those things where I want to work with this table for a while to see if I even want to do anything like that, but it's kind of a cool thought. And then the last thing I may do in the future is to add some sort of lever action or lever mechanism for the slide outs, but for now they work perfectly fine just as is. So that's pretty much it, guys. As always, I thank you for watching. The next projects that are going to be coming up are the Playhouse project for my daughter. That will probably be a couple of videos in the making. And then I really need to get to finishing up the inside of the shop. So this table is definitely going to come in handy, probably for both of those. So anyway, I will see you guys next time, and check me out on Instagram, thumbs up, all that good stuff. See ya!